So, you're a business owner dedicated to the significant and sustainable growth of both you and your business. Welcome to the Add a Zero podcast.
Hi, I'm Jay Allen from Mitre North. I'm the host of the Add a Zero podcast, and I'm super excited to be able to share with you that this episode is a special edition episode. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd like to think that you're getting some great value from all of the episodes that we're sharing around how to be able to significantly and sustainably grow both you and your business to add a zero. But today, I want to do something a little bit different. So bear with me as we talk about awards and the benefit of them. Now, I'm all for certificates and qualifications. I'm all for people being able to have an accreditation towards what it is that they do. But I don't believe that it's the be-all and end-all, that you need a master's degree or a postgraduate or a doctorate in order to be able to start a business. Certainly some of the most successful businesses that I know and I've worked with of people that have simply left school and set up. So I'm not saying that education is the be-all and end-all. It's a nice to have. I'm also not saying that you should go out there and pay for lots of awards to be able to buy into an X, Y, and Z and have lots of trophies on the desk and in the cabinets to be able to demonstrate who and what and where. There is something quite special, though, about a public acknowledgement of other people being able to acknowledge of who and what and where of what you've achieved. You know, those 5-star reviews, the testimonials of other people saying great things about you and your work. Well, today's episode is devoted to somebody who's done just that. I'm really, really proud that not only is Steve a great person to work with and a phenomenal business owner in his own right, but he's now the third of our clients to receive public acknowledgement and award for service to his industry as a direct result of us helping and supporting them to be able to do more and be more as part of that conscientious business owner to be able to grow and evolve not just his own business, but to shape an entire industry. Steve Carr is the founder of Mind Canyon. And when I first met Steve, was responsible for being able to deliver some public speaking in order to be able to share the importance of talking about mental health and mental health challenges that we can all have and relate to at some stage in our life. And over the last few years or so, we worked together to be able to really shape and understand as to what it takes to be an industry leader as opposed to simply growing and evolving as a business. And earlier this year, Steve was awarded a British Citizenship Award by the Palace for service to his industry. So this episode is about catching up with Steve Carr from Mind Canyon to understand a little bit more about the journey he's taken, both prior and during and post involvement with Mitre North and the Add a Zero methodology, and to understand what it actually takes to become a British Citizenship Award winner. Let's have a look at my interview with Steve Carr. I've now arrived in Thailand in order to be able to meet with dear friend and former colleague, former client, Steve, to discuss a little bit further Steve and his success, really. Steve, welcome to the Add a Zero podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for coming all this way for this podcast.
the efforts and the distances are nothing compared to the friendship that we've built and what we're willing to do for our clients.
Wow, Thailand, amazing. I
was going to say, well, whilst the offer is Thailand, the things that we're willing to do, if it was maybe somewhere less idyllic as this, then perhaps we'd have to do a Zoom call just in case. I'm washing my hair that day. Steve, thanks very much for hosting us in your home here in Thailand. Perhaps it would be beneficial to be able to start the story by telling us a little bit about you and your background perhaps before we even met, really, as to where was Steve, what was Steve doing before I came in and interrupted your life?
What a journey it's been since we met. And we met, a few years ago now. I can't recall how many years ago it was now.
14, 15-ish, so 10 years ago at the time of recording this.
10 years ago, and that was at a talk, I believe, where I was actually telling people why I was at this talk in the first place. So it goes back a little while, and Steve, who I am now, is a mental health, workplace wellbeing, suicide first aid and breathwork practitioner, and living in Thailand. But it hasn't always been that way. There's just been many events that led up to me coming to here. So I'll give you a little bit of back history. So currently 48 years of age, living in Thailand, living my ultimate life. But life wasn't always this good. It was very challenging, very, very difficult. I grew up in a very traumatic environment. Mum and dad, both physically, emotionally abusive, not always around. Grew up in a family of 5, so an elder brother Paul, younger sister Claire, and I was deeply traumatic. By the age of 14. I had found my way into drinking drugs to be able to mask what was going on at home. And so I fell into a group of people who were exactly the same as me, trying to escape the home life. That was until it carried on most of my life. But at the age of 15, sadly, I lost my brother to a drink driver. I was 15, he was 16, back in 1991. And this is when my mental health problems really started to come to the surface. There was no help back then. So didn't get any help until much, much later on in life. But it was really just trying to find my way through life, trying to find out who Steve was. And I didn't actually know any of this until I was 39 years of age, so it was 11 years ago now, when I sadly attempted to take my life by suicide because of all these events happening, from homelessness, drug addiction, the wild upbringing, to saying all these unhelpful coping strategies or helpful coping strategies just stopped working. And it was then that I knew that I needed to change. So for me, I went to my doctor, the GP, who was very good, who thanked me for coming in. And this started my journey of recovery. And as you know, it's been quite a journey to this point. So a little, but about me is a very difficult childhood, coming into having my own business, living in Thailand, and having 2 businesses, in fact, one in England and one here now.
Quite. And so I remember the first time that we met. I've been working with a client who was running a networking group, ironically in Essex, which neither of us are from, and looking to be able to grow this networking group and spread it across the country. And he'd set up a networking group in Manchester, and for one reason or another, he'd had 2 or 3 people, or 2 or 3 iterations of trying to run this networking group in Manchester, and for some reason, despite them running very successfully in other parts of the country, Manchester just seems to be a problem. I don't know whether it was attracting the wrong person to try and run it, or they were coming with the wrong agenda, or something. They were hitting a stumbling block. And I said, well, look, Manchester's, of all the events that you're running, Manchester's the one that's closest to my doorstep. Why don't I step in and find out as to exactly what the problem is in Manchester, and see if we can resolve that. And so I stepped into being able to help run and relaunch this networking group, of which we needed to have some speakers and this and the other. And all I remember is a LinkedIn message late one Thursday afternoon that simply said, "I want to come and speak at your event." And I was like, well, that's wonderful. Who's this guy? Why does he want to do a little bit of research and find out that you're not from Manchester at all? You were down in Swindon, if I remember rightly, which is not from around the corner. So we ended up having a phone conversation, and I said, well, it's very kind of you, but Manchester's not right round the corner. We haven't got a budget to pay for these things. Do you still want to come? And he went, yeah, I want to come to your event. Can I come speak? I went, hell yeah. If you're willing to travel all the way from Swindon, then clearly there's a message that you need to convey, and we've got an audience that's keen to hear it. And you turned up, and one of the things that impressed me the most from first ever meeting you is, one, you were proactive, you were looking for these events to be able to speak at. Two, you'd made this conscious effort that you were going to travel at your own expense and possibly stay over it because it was a late evening finish and the likes. There was some considerable impact that you'd had to make to be able to get to that event. And then when you arrived, my God, you were professional. You turned up with everything in place and you were ready to be able to rock and roll. And how do you want me to be able to best support the event? I was like, if only all of the speakers that we'd invited had been half as kind of considerate as yourself. And then when you spoke, my God, you captured everyone in a moment, in a heartstring, with regards to a story that you shared, not about this is me and me too and all that type of stuff, but something that was so relevant to so many different people on so many different levels. You don't need to have gone through a traumatic parentage. You don't need to have gone through an abusive relationship. You don't need to have gone through the traumas that you've been through with regards to losing your brother, I'm sorry for your loss, or with your own challenges with regards to how to address that. But the way in which you spoke resonated with all of the audience, that at a moment's notice we all realised that one turn of the die, and this could be me. You made it so relative to everybody in the audience that I think we were all reaching for a Kleenex by the time you'd finished and the likes. And that's when we first met. I remember after the event we sat down and I offered some compliment with regards to your presentation that day. But I also offered I asked whether you were open to feedback. And that's always a challenge. Some people don't take feedback well, and yet you were very open to it, and I offered a few thoughts and ideas, and I guess that subsequently started our professional relationship as opposed to anything else.
And that had such an impact, the feedback that you gave in the way that you did it, and that was why I then pursued you then afterwards to say, hey, listen, I'd love to be a better speaker, but also how do we work together because of the way that you did it.
Okay.
Now, if it was anybody else go, oh, you know what, let me give you some feedback. Okay, well, you haven't asked me that, you've told me that you want to, but the way that you did it and the professionalism, and it was just kind. And I think that's what a lot of what we're missing nowadays is just simply kindness. Yeah. And going back to something that you said a moment ago, is that touched us all, is we've all got mental health. And you're absolutely right, the one turn of the die could just flip it into an event where everything spirals out of control.
Massively so, massively so. I mean, and then I guess the work that we started doing together, and just to put this into context for the people that are either watching or listening to this, depending on which platform you choose to stay on, or to listen to this on rather. When I first met Steve was in the very, very early stages of Adazero. It didn't have a name by then. It was still very much in beta. We were still very much working on it in the back office. That, unbeknownst to you as a client at the time, we were testing this stuff. No, I didn't. the things that we were working on, we'd applied within our own business. I got all the theory to back it up, but we needed some test cases. We needed to be able to prove that this was going to work in any situation. So when we went to market, about 10 years ago now, the first few people through the door, through this new methodology that we were starting to roll out. Like I say, it didn't even have a brand by then. It was simply, we're doing some coaching. Would you be interested in some coaching? But it was the very start point of what has led to become Adazero, that I've always wanted to come back and meet some of the people that we worked with right at the very beginnings to determine as to what's been the long-term impact, long beyond our involvement, our professional involvement. I know that we've remained friends ever since, but what impact has that had? So let's just spend a couple of minutes talking about, we probably worked together for about 15 months-ish, thereabouts, on a professional basis. It was always one-to-one. It was always tailored to you and your business. It wasn't a cookie-cutter, right, now do this, now do that, now do the other, best of luck to you type stuff. But it's all right me talking about it from a delivery point of view. from a receiver, there was some works to be done, Steve.
Yeah, there certainly was. And I had never ran a business or had a business prior to meeting you. This was the beginning of my journey also. I didn't have a clue, didn't know what to do business-wise. So I thought, well, I need guidance, and what better a person than somebody that's just been kind in the first place. And that was my reason for approaching you. That your way, your methodology seemed to ring true with me. Having ethical within this as well. And I'd been through a lot of coaches, seen a lot of coaches and how unethical they could be. So when I heard you speak, when I heard you talk about your product, of course, I was sold on this, because that's exactly what I was looking for. Somebody that wasn't full of themselves, wasn't full of shit, and wasn't going to say, I'm going to make your business or, the best thing since sliced bread. It was, okay, let's work on that. What do you need? And I thought that was wonderful, the way that you asked what I was needing. Didn't quite know at that point, but I think that's how it developed, that you wanted to know, that you wanted to help me grow the business. And like you say, we worked together for 15 months, and in that time, this is when COVID really started to happen. And just prior to COVID, all the bookings that I had, speaking events, the one-to-one coaching, everything that was face-to-face, all fell through. Mm-hmm. And it was at this point, I was like, oh shit, okay, well I need to go and do something work-wise, but also I need to grow the business. So I was out back to work, and I thought, well, I've got to put food on the table, I've got to live, and it's got to be sustainable. So I had another job, as well as having coaching from yourself, trying to grow my business, that I could leave this other job and go full on into the business. And it was actually with your help that enabled me to do this. It was giving me that confidence and that drive to be able to say, hey, listen, I've got this product, I know what I'm talking about, I just kind of need to execute it. How do I do this?
Yeah.
Never having it done, having been through that process before, sorry. So this is where I needed guidance. And the guidance that you gave was absolutely wonderful. There was one key thing within it that changed it all, which I'm sure that you'll agree. You could give all the sound business advice that you like and all the best opinion solutions, but unless the person does the work, then this is all just, okay, well, this is what you should be doing. We can tell you everything, and it works, we know it does, but unless you take that big action, nothing changes.
Massively. And, the one thing that I was delighted with, that, we are keen as a business to be able to be of service to each of those that we are working with. And there's a huge difference between being in service and being of service. And we want to ensure that for every client that we work with, we are of service to them by understanding, where are you? What are you good at? What are you excelling at? What are the things that are missing? It's almost like looking at a 500-piece jigsaw and saying, well, in actual fact, you've got 374 pieces already in place. You don't need a cookie cutters to say, here's a 500-page textbook. Best of luck to you. But it's beyond that. It's beyond saying there's 126 missing pieces. Best of luck to you. It's then saying, but what's the picture he's trying to paint? And what shape of piece do I need to give him that he's able to work with now? What do you need next? And then what do you need? But then also appreciating that shit happens. And whilst we're working on this, something over here can happen. Like, the needs to be able to put food on the table whilst we're busy trying to grow a business, and acknowledging that and saying, well, okay, so let's work on the time frame that you have got available. What can we do to create the quick wins that enable you to have that decision that says, at some stage in the future, the one thing that's holding you back is a full-time salary. When do we want to substitute that with creating our own salary? So yeah, Adazero in its essence was always based on, let's meet people where they were, let's find out where they want to go, let's find out how they want to get there, and then let's put the things in place to enable them to be able to do so. And I'm hopeful that you felt that was prevalent in what we did together.
Oh, for sure. I was just thinking there was one thing that was paramount that you did, which was you took me through the money aspect of the business as well. I remember this vividly. said, okay, so I want to know every penny of where you are, what's coming in, what's going out, where are you spending money, what's the cost of your training? And prior to meeting you, I was involved with this very big Facebook group that I created whilst walking Great Britain. And I poured everything into this. And I just remember meeting you and my ex-partner, who is an accountant as well. And you both said to me something which changed the course of what I was doing within that group, which was, okay, Steve, wonderful, it's a great group, it helped you, it stroked your ego quite clearly, you did well, but how's that putting food on your table? And I was in this group daily, just offering advice.
I wouldn't say it was an exceptional group. You built a very successful Facebook community that you served incredibly diligently, but without any reward other than a pat on the back and a well done, Steve. And ironically, the more that you did that, the more people wanted help, the more people that you felt capable of helping. It became an ever decreasing circle of dependency of them and you, and to an extent, you with that community. And looking at being able to understand the flow of money through a business. Where does it come from? How is it being generated? When does it come to us? Once it arrives with us, what do we do with it? What's it assigned to? When does it leave us? Why does it leave us? Where does it go to? Understanding that flow of money that we don't either go or grow broke is essential in every business. And you were quick to be. The thing I liked most about working with you is that you were open to learning. You continually asked challenging questions. You were continually thinking about what's next. But then ultimately, it's your business that you went away and you applied everything that was being taught. That led to the transition from, like you say, having a full-time job and running this as a side hustle to do a full-time salary for yourself, and then subsequently enabled to be able to put a few coffers in the pot. Now, I don't want to go through ego, as it were, but it's fair to say that for every entrepreneur, externally, we tend to measure success through material things. And don't get me wrong, I'm as guilty as everybody else that, we all want the car, the watch, the house, the dream holiday and all that type of stuff. And I'm not a dream stealer. My job is to be able to enable people to achieve those things, as opposed to challenge them on those things. So is it fair to say that it worked? Is it fair to say that you ticked a few boxes in the past, as it were?
I think it's fair to say ticked all those boxes. So the watch, the car, part ownership of a plane, moved to Thailand.
Hang on, let's just back that up a bit. We had a motorbike, we had a classic car and a supercar at that. We had the watch, but then we had shares in an aeroplane. It's not on everybody's list, but it just goes to show that whatever you turn your minds to. I remember one of the times listening to you speak and you talking about having been homeless and walked the length of Britain to try and raise awareness around mental health and anguish and the likes, to subsequently becoming a qualified pilot. Now, come on, Steve, let's just stop for a moment and acknowledge the fact that that's a success in itself.
It's a very interesting one with all of this. Much like yourself, I loved the materialistic goods. I still do. I love my ego, but it's in check. I have to stay grounded. There was a time when I had nothing, lived on the streets, was addicted to drugs, and I couldn't see tomorrow, let alone the future. So I will always look back at that and say, okay, I made it from that, not, okay, all of this came as a result of, just the business. It came as a result of the passion that I would not let anybody else suffer with this. So the money was a byproduct of the work that I was doing. So over COVID, I delivered over 200 mental health and suicide prevention courses because it was so needed at the time.
Yeah.
But also I'm going to be honest, that money changed me. The money was coming in, I had more than I knew what to do with. So I bought the car, I bought the plane, I bought the bike, but it was starting to go to my head. And I remember whilst walking Britain that I met a millionaire that took me in. And I remember him taking me in, and he offered me a lift initially. And I just asked him, he was alone, he was on his own. Sadly, his wife passed away of cancer. He was living in this huge mansion on his own. I said, why did you pick me up? And he said, because I could see you were struggling, and I too was struggling. I'm lonely, I'm here, and I've got everything. You were out there walking, you've got nothing, and you're in pain. And he said, I was lonely, you were lonely. And we had this common ground then of, I've just met a millionaire with the same problem as what I've got, and it doesn't matter who you are, how much money you've got. And I just recall the next day he spent thousands on walking boots, on all the equipment that I needed, but he said one thing to me which changed everything, which was, when you get to the end, I want you to give all this away to somebody that needs it. So how I stay grounded now is that experience, but also is I gift people that can't afford it, that aren't in a space to be able to afford training. Every course, at least one person on mental health and suicide prevention, because it keeps me grounded. And I just remember, my partner at the time, she was saying, Steve, just remember through all of this, stay grounded, because as easy as you've got it, you can lose it.
Amen to that. I remember being interviewed, sorry, I know this is your interview, but I remember being interviewed for a podcast with an American host. And I was talking about predominantly different circumstances, same outcome, and said, look, success means something completely different to every single person, any day of the week. You know, sometimes success is waking up and still being here. Sometimes success is being able to get through the day without crying. Other times success is winning a new contract and a client and this and the other. So success has so many different connotations. And yet, if we are overly successful without remaining grounded, and I used an American terminology because it was an American host, but I said we often become a schmuck. I said, and the true success is acknowledging when we've become a schmuck and learning how to go back to being grounded again, as opposed to getting into this place and then just being comfortable in it.
Yeah.
Now, you know, all credits to you. Not only have you delivered well over 200 mental health and suicide prevention first aid courses, to be able to help endless people from being able to recognise those early signs and symptoms and be able to have a quick intervention and know when to be able to recommend and refer. I was gifted one of those places at the very early start of your mental health first aid journey. I remember being invited to come to Swindon and qualifying as a suicide prevention first aider under your instruction. And I'll be honest, I accepted because you were a client. It was an incredibly kind gift that, you know, I was always taught never look a gift horse in the mouth, and it was something that meant a lot to you, that therefore meant a lot to me because it meant a lot to you. And I came along and thought, well, this is one of those qualifications that I hope I'll never, ever, ever need to use, but at least I know I've done it. I wrote a LinkedIn post to thank you for the training and posted it as a means of being able to promote you in the business. And in the next 5 months was called upon 3 times to talk people down in that exact circumstance, that if I hadn't had that training, would they have called me? Probably not. But if they hadn't called me and hadn't known who else to call, then circumstances could be completely different. And that's 3 lives that I know that you've saved as a direct result of that training, that I can't even think about the amount of 200 training courses plus the amount of people that have been impacted by your experienced and tutorage that have enabled countless lives to be saved, both then and forevermore. Because it's a qualification that I now recognise the importance of maintaining, as opposed to a tick box, stick it on a wall somewhere and move on. Thailand.
Yes.
We didn't necessarily discuss Thailand when we first started working together. I don't suppose it was really much of a consideration or a thought process when we first started working together, but I guess as things evolve, all of a sudden, once we start to tick some of the boxes off, then we can start to have a recalibrate with regards to, well, what other boxes could I start filling in instead? Tell me a little bit about, where did Thailand come from?
Well, you say that it wasn't something that we discussed, and it really genuinely wasn't. However, on my vision board, I had that I would be living abroad somewhere. And since as young as I can remember, I said that I will live abroad.
Yeah.
I will go somewhere hot and I will live by the sea. And a wonderful opportunity came up. As sad as it is, it came up. So just after COVID, I was borderline burnout. Dad had just passed away of Alzheimer's. Just moved from this wonderfully big house in the country to a smaller house, and sadly my relationship with my former partner was coming to an end. And I decided to inform LinkedIn that I was going on holiday the next day and I'm putting down tools because I'm on the verge of burnout. Not having booked any holiday, but thinking, I now need to, because otherwise I'm going to look like an idiot. So that night, as soon as I logged off of LinkedIn, I booked a holiday for 1 month in Thailand. And I toured from the north down to the south. And I came across the island of Copenhagen, where I'm currently living now. And I came here for its healing properties, the modalities that were being delivered, breathwork and such classes. So I went along to a few classes and felt amazing within the environment. So after a month of being here in Thailand and a week in Copenhagen, I went back home and started to question everything, including the weather. And thought, why am I even coming back? And so what I decided to do was put a plan in action. So I bought a one-way ticket back to Thailand for 3 months later and started to sell everything. And so a few bits went into a garage, and I thought, I need to have a plan, because you can't just come here with no plan and no work.
Sure.
So I thought, I've got the business in the UK, what's to stop me continuing the business in a holistic retreat centre, in several, within Thailand? Mm-hmm. So plan A was I come over here and work for somebody else in, it was a rehabilitation centre, but it fell through.
Okay.
Plan B was start my own business, create my own business, and continue doing the mental health, wellbeing, suicide prevention, and breathwork. And then plan C was, fuck it, let's go home. So I'm currently on plan B. And that's 16 months later.
Wow. Has it really been 16 months already?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Unbelievable, isn't it?
Absolutely so. I mean, it only seems like a few months since I remember reading that LinkedIn post and agreeing to meet up in Birmingham with you to be able to have a conversation before you left.
Yeah. It's wild how time has flown. But in that time, I've managed to secure a property. I have my own transport. I'm working with some of the biggest retreat centres in Copenhagen, designing and delivering courses, and also a breathwork practitioner now. Well, as you know,
I was going to say, I've just this afternoon experienced my first ever breathwork, which I've got to share. I was somewhat sceptical of, but was incredibly enlightening and something that ought to be on people's agenda. Well, there's somebody here that knows all about that and was able to guide us all the way through it. Steve, I guess the other question then is, I guess one of the challenges with Adazero as a brand is people question, is that really possible? Is that for me, or is it just hype and BS, as we've seen all over social from various other sources and the likes? My concern for people teetering on the edge is that they'll overlook an opportunity. They will see this in the same light as perhaps other things that they've either experienced or heard of, and this and the other type of stuff, and think it's too good to be true. I'd like to suggest to you, and we're going to talk about London in a minute, if that's all right, that it's not too good to be true, that anything that you set your minds to is possible with a little bit of guidance and mentoring, but with a hell of a lot of hard work in the background, that I can point you in the right direction, I can pick you up and dust you off if need be, I can question some of the thoughts and ideas, but in actual fact it comes down to hours and hours and hours of bloody hard work, which paid off somewhat in London just a month ago. Steve, tell us a little bit about your infamous trip back to the winter of London a month ago.
And just to answer your question there as well, going back to something you just said there about, there's a lot of offers out there from coaches. There's a lot of false promises, and I'm the most fucking skeptical person on the planet. I do not invest in everything, just quite simply because I see through a lot of this.
Yeah.
And I was having a conversation last night that I have people in my life that are ethical. I have people in my life that are genuine. I have people in my life that aren't about scamming people, because I had that when I was younger, and I had to escape away from this. Coming from a toxic environment, you spot toxicity so quickly, so you do everything to avoid it. So yeah, a lot of people are, well, why should I invest in that? And I'm the same, why should I invest in it? But it was that, again, coming back to how it was delivered, and there was no false promises within this. It was, I'm going to be completely open and totally genuine with you. And that's what sold it for me. The genuineness, openness, the caring, the kindness, that made the difference. Because you could have given me the whole spiel, and I would have went, no, I've worked in sales, my parents were both abusive, toxic, you're talking shit, and I probably would have walked away. But
sure,
you were completely genuine, and still are to this day.
The good news is, Steve, is that since we first started working together, and like I say, it was in those beta days of Adazero, whilst I was still doing everything manually and working it through, I've got all of this theory. How do I apply it in practice to this business or this business or this business? It was all tweak and amend as we went along, and you were a willing participant in being able to work. We worked side by side. It certainly wasn't a case, and it's never been a case of I'll tell you what I did. Just do as I say, son, and it'll all be all right. It was very much a case of I wanted to still be the soldier in the trenches alongside you and say, well, we're in this together. And the good news is the fact that I'm not going to desert you, but we're going to work through whatever it is that we need to work through to get to get to where we want to be. The good news is the fact that 10 years on, we've now got a lot more understanding. We've now worked with well over 100,000 other people to be able to help and support and understand what, where and when. The start point is a lot easier for people than it was having to travel from Swindon to Manchester to have a choice, a chance conversation. That we've now got this free to use tool that says, listen, don't even pick up the phone, don't email us, simply go online and fill in the survey, our Adder Survey scale-up survey, answer a few questions, and we'll provide a fully bespoke, very tailored, quite comprehensive 18, 19, 20-page report on the positives and the vulnerabilities within your business, that you could simply download it, take the report and say, do you know what, I don't need a coach, I'm just going to work through all of the things that they've suggested. It could very well be that you say, this looks great, but I don't know how to do some of those things. Now I can pick the phone up and say, can you give us a hand? But the good news is the fact that you helped to contribute towards understanding what that journey looks like in order for other people to now benefit from it.
That's good. Well, we both win.
It's a win-win. Yeah. Let's just quickly dive back to London, because I'm super excited about what you're able to achieve. Now, let's just put a few accolades out. I'm right to thinking that you've walked the length of Britain.
Yes.
I'm also right in thinking that you've cycled from somewhere in Europe back to Parliament.
I cycled from London to... Where did I cycle to?
Barcelona, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Barcelona.
You've also taken a petition and walked from, was it Swindon to London, to Downing Street, to present a petition all around mental health and workplace and the likes, directly to the Prime Minister. Who was the Prime Minister at the time?
David Cameron.
Mr. Cameron. How was that? How well was that received?
It was received well. It was the outcome that wasn't. So, typical government, isn't it? Thank you for your report. We'll give some money and consideration to this. Still to this day, we're waiting, and numerous people after me have done very similar. Empty promises, sadly, by government. And this is why I think that at the time, back in 2015, I decided to take matters into my own hand and start becoming a trainer. To walk the entire length of Britain, to find out what the problems were, hand in a on the ground, boots on the ground report of what's actually going on. For it to be dismissed, what does that tell you?
Yeah. Well, it's not been entirely dismissed.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Because 10 years later or so, last month you were awarded a British Citizenship Award for your service to the mental health industry. In one, providing the training, but also the amount of devotion that you've given to creating such an incredibly successful Facebook community, for being able to raise awareness across the country, and now subsequently globally, looking at mental health suicide prevention from, like you say, from grassroots level, to being able to understand that anyone could learn how to be able to better understand or recognise or how to intervene earlier on to prevent those things from becoming such dire problems that we see, and a growing problem in today's communities.
And all that stemming back from working in an organisation that didn't recognise the signs of somebody experiencing poor mental health and mental illness. All that driven by the need to give this training to organisations and people that need it on a daily basis. We go back to what you were saying earlier, where everybody in that room almost reached for a Kleenex because we know it touches everyone.
Yeah.
So, that training is so much needed within organisations. When we think about it, we spend the majority of our time at work. And if we haven't got the provisions to be able to talk if the circumstances aren't there, we simply don't. And it was something that you said earlier, which was, evident, which was, had I not done that suicide first aid course, then these people potentially wouldn't be alive.
Yeah.
Now, if we don't know that we need it, how many more people are suffering, are struggling? And so it was recognised, and I was truly humbled to receive the award for British Citizens Award for the work that I do in mental health and suicide prevention. It's not something that I ever thought I would get. We don't do this for the awards, but to have that recognition. Finally,
to get some form of acknowledgement as the fact that there is a significant problem that you are making a significant contributions to. Despite, it's short of them taking on some responsibility and doing something about it nationally, but recognising that there are people like you out there that are doing above and beyond in order to be able to bridge that gap is a start point, I guess.
Oh, for sure. And being in a room with 26 other people doing equally as powerful work just says how much that it's needed, but we go above and beyond for something that we're so passionate about.
Amen.
So it's humbled to be in that room, but also, imposter syndrome. My gosh, I remember just sitting there breathing, I was feeling really extremely nervous, thinking these people, oh my gosh, wow, truly phenomenal people.
Absolutely so. I mean, every story there was a tearjerker. Yours amongst 25 others that all were so well deserving of acknowledgement and recognition. Steve, whilst you're living in Thailand, you're not, although you are on the other side of the world, you're not disconnected. How would people find you, reach out to you, learn more about the work that you're doing? Where do people find you so we can ensure that we get it added to the show notes for today's show?
Sure. First and foremost, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn and I post there most days that Steve Carr, BCA, that's me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook, exactly the same on a page, my own profile, Steve Carr. My website, www.mindcanyon.org. You can find all my work there. I'm still doing mental health, workplace wellbeing and suicide prevention, but now offering breath work as well. Same handle on Instagram, and I think that's all of them. Yeah, I'm pretty much.
We'll make sure we put it all in the show notes so people have got links to click and this and the other type of stuff. I'm really grateful for the fact that I was invited to be able to into your home to be able to come and conduct this interview. Thanks very much for hosting me. But I wanted to be able to share with yourself also that this is why we do what we do. It's not about being able to jump up and down and wear dicky bows and go to black tie events, although it was nice to be able to accompany Steve to London last month. It's about being able to understand that for every single business owner out there, that it doesn't matter where you are in business, it doesn't matter how big or small, it doesn't matter whether you're tech or whether you're product or service, it doesn't matter whereabouts in the world that you're based. We all acknowledge that we are faced with some challenges, some difficulties, that we are exceptionally good at some things and perhaps not yet that familiar with other things that we are going to face as we grow and scale the business. And that's what Adazero has been specifically set up for, is to be able to sit alongside, sit in the background, sit in the wings, and be able to support the business owner or owners in order to be able to support them in whichever direction they want to be able to take. And Steve is a perfect example of somebody that's been able to take that on board, but then subsequently do the work that's necessary, ask the right questions in order to be able to realise the dream and live out here in Thailand. Steve, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you for coming.
It's been a real pleasure, thank you.
Thanks.
And there you have it. You've learned from the horse's mouth, as it were, from his delightful place in Koh Phangan in Thailand, of exactly what it takes to be able to start from humble beginnings and to be able to grow not just a business, but a movement of not just hundreds, but thousands of people that have been impacted by his ESG, by his CSR, by his willingness to be able to do something beyond self and profit. It's been an absolute delight to be able to support and guide Steve to be able to make some crucial decisions on enabling him to be able to not just grow him as an individual or his business, but to be able to add a zero to both. God bless to you, Steve, and I wish you every ongoing success in the future. I'd love to do that for you in the next coming weeks and months. So if today's been of an inspiration, make sure to connect with Steve, and I'll put the links to his availability and his platform in the show notes. But if that's something that's resonated with you, then I'd love to have a conversation about what it takes to be able to add a zero and to be able to do so as a conscientious business owner. God bless, take care. I'll see you again next week.
That's all for this episode. As always, we really thank you for listening and welcome your comments, thoughts, and suggestions. So please do drop us a line by emailing podcast@mytruenorth.biz. And don't forget, if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button on whichever platform you're listening to this through. And tell your colleagues and business network all about who we are. You've been listening to the Add a Zero podcast, presented by Jay Allen. Brought to you in association with My True North, the UK's leading ethical coaching company.